Good afternoon, friends. I know that we have had our live stream not work out well the last couple of times, but I didn't want anybody to miss a thing. So I thought I would take today and I would go back and preach the sermon that I gave the first week I was here, and at some point I will come back and preach the second one because I know both of those have been missed. It's not the same as getting to see all of the beautiful faces of the people that were here, but since we don't have a good recording of that, I can't offer that to you. So for now, let's take what we can get. My name's Chris. If you have not met me, I'm the new pastor here at Hadley Friends. I'm excited to be a part of this group. I have been welcomed so warmly, and it's been a real blessing. Between now and Advent, we're going to be examining the story of Scripture, the story of God's people, from the very beginning, creation and Genesis, and through the fall of humanity, and ending with the rescue of the Israelites from slavery as they crossed the Red Sea in Exodus. And then we'll pause for Advent, and we'll come back to that in about a year and a half. We'll have covered the whole story of Scripture, taking breaks here and there as we need to for holidays and special events and things like that, which is why I felt like it was important to go back and share this sermon with those of you who couldn't see on the live stream. So let's get started at the very beginning in Genesis 1. In Genesis 1, God created plants and trees in all of their kinds, fish and birds in their kinds, and land animals in all of their kinds. And on the sixth day, along with the animals, God created humanity. Genesis 1:26-31 reads like this: Then God said, "Let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animal of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humans in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I've given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything God had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So in this scripture reading, God created people in God's image. What does it mean to be God's image? Some people call this the Imago Dei. We bear the image of God, Imago Dei. I have a magnificent beard, but I see that many of you do not. Which of us then was made in God's image? I'm quite tall, but my mother, she was a short woman. Is it me, or is it my mother who bears the image of God? You think not, I assume. But if it's not my hair or my height, could it be my skin color? Some have tragically and wrongly claimed that it is to justify their racism. Maybe that all sounds too specific. You think I'm being dense, and it's not about hair, beard, anything special like that, but it's more about the generic form of the human. But if I lose a limb and my figure has changed, have I lost the image of God? You see where this is going by now. The Imago Dei is not about beard or height or skin or shape. It must run somehow deeper, but what? What is it? I met my daughter's mother when she was 3 months pregnant with Audrey. I named her. I cut her umbilical cord. When her mother and I parted, I still had her over the summers and the holiday breaks. I was included in all of the parental decisions, and she'll always be my child. She's grown now, and I have grandchildren. But when she was little, she had short black hair, and she had a face structure that looked a bit like mine. Bless her heart. People would take one look at her and say, well, you can tell she's yours. She looks just like you. You could never deny it. I'd smile. It was such a compliment. She was such a beautiful baby. I'd thank them knowing that it couldn't really be that they were seeing my image. It wasn't possible. Before she was born, I discovered that her biological father was an estranged childhood friend of mine. Out of respect for him and in hopes that he would step up, I went by the title Papa, reserving the name Dad for him. He did eventually show up, but they didn't spend a whole lot of time together. She knew him, but just didn't spend much time with him. That's why I was so surprised when I started seeing his image in her. I recognized this old childhood friend's face. It wasn't her looks that caught me. It was this expression that she made. It was a turn of phrase that she started using. It was mannerisms that somehow just came out. It was somehow in her bones. His image was more than eye shape or hair color. It wasn't even simply picked up through contact, like mannerisms that you just pick up from the people you know, because he didn't have any. It was a way of being that was embedded in her, the fruit of which appeared as she grew. So I wonder, if we're made in the image of God, what is it that God has planted in us that as we grow might also come to fruit? In Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, the language this text was written in, there are two main words that are translated image. The first is pesel. This word is used for basic carvings. It comes from the root that means to cut, and it was about being connected to the material more than the object that the material represented. It came with this connotation of being cutting something from wood or stone, like chiseling it out. The other word was tselem. This word is used for divine images. Depending on the context, it's sometimes translated as image, and sometimes it's translated as idol. This word is more focused on the object depicted than the material. They're often used interchangeably, but tselem is the one from our story today. And as we shall see, people are always, when they're referenced as an image in the Imago Dei or in other places, people are always tselem, not pesel. They're always the divine image. In the mind of ancient Hebrews, a tselem, the divine image, was an image, pesel, of something holy or divine, somehow connected to the gods. A tselem didn't simply represent the divine, but where the tselem was, there was the God also. It even actively embodied the qualities of the God, like a bull might represent the strength of the deity that it represented, or a long pole might represent fertility. They even believed that a little bit of the life force of the god lived in this idol. The god was thought to be actually present in the image, very similar to the way some traditions believe in the actual presence of Christ, found in the Eucharist or the communion bread. This story in Genesis, though, it flips the script on idols. It changes the way that we think about it, and I think it's intentional. See, in this story, God forms the people into God's image instead of the people forming images into God's. The image of God is molded from clay instead of cut from wood or stone, which I think is why we are never called pesel. Instead of God living in something dead, God breathes into them the breath of life. And the temple of God becomes a living being. Unless you think that this all just applies to these first people in this very first story, the use of Salem is used every time when image and people are connected. For instance, it's used when people have children and those children were in the image of the parent. You can find an example of this in Genesis 5:3 if you want to look ahead. The Quaker belief of that of God in everyone, that presence of God inside, the image of God, the Imago Dei, is right here at the very beginning in Genesis 1. And it demands that we stop reserving special treatment for holy idols, sacred sanctuaries, and instead that we recognize that the actual presence of God is in every single human being we come across. The Quaker idea of that of God in everyone helps us to understand what it means to be an image bearer of God, the Imago Dei. Each person is a holy, living Salem, or image of God. We're more than the holy bread of the Eucharist and sacred temples. We're the real presence where God is already inside each of us. Like the ancient idols, as the Imago Dei, we can also reflect the divine attributes of God in the world when we act out the heavenly ways. Jesus tells a parable that helps us to see this in action. You can turn to Luke 10:29 through 37. Here, a man asked Jesus, "What must I do to get this abundant life, this heaven that you're always talking about? How do I live this full way?" Jesus says, "You got to love God and love your neighbors." But the man wonders. He says, "Yeah, Jesus, but who even is my neighbor? What do you mean by that?" And Jesus tells a story about a Jewish man who was robbed and beat and left naked and half dead on the side of a road. One at a time, a priest and a Levite both walk by, crossing to the other side to avoid the man. Now I have to step back here for a second because Jesus is being funny here. And it doesn't come through the text because we don't know the road. But if I told you about a road around the corner, you would know what I was talking about, and it's important here. So the road that he's referring to is this road that is like this wide. It's so small. And there's a cliff on this side, which we can imagine is probably the ditch. Somewhere on the edge over here is where this man has been left half dead. And then there's a wall over here. And so the image that Jesus is painting is of the priest and the Levite. If the man is over here, in order to cross to the other side of the road, they have to hug the wall. Like, this is a ridiculous picture of going out of your way to avoid something. But these are the people that the listeners would have expected to be the hero of the story. A Levite, a priest, these are the holiest of people. But they didn't. They just ignored the man. They went out of their way to hug the wall and cross. Samaritans, on the other hand, this was a hated, despised group of people. There was generations of tension between the Jewish people and Samaritans at the time. They were viewed in much the same way as Palestinians are viewed in modern Israel today. So when Jesus explained that it was a Samaritan who stopped to help the man, who took him to an inn, paid for his stay, bandaged his wound, bought him food and lodging, and even went so far as to set up a tab and tell the innkeeper whatever he needs, give him, and I'll pay for it when I come back. and leaving some money knowing that that would happen. His listeners, whew, I can only imagine they must have been having a really hard time putting this together. How on earth does a Samaritan do all of that? And as they're wrestling with that, as their minds are reeling, trying to figure out how on earth would that ever be the Samaritan doing that, Jesus asked a good query. Which of these was a neighbor to the man? Jesus challenged them to reconsider, what is the image of a neighbor? What does that image look like? It turns out it wasn't the priest wearing their vestments. That wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't the Levite with the right pedigree. Instead, it was the one they least expected, but the one who acted in alignment with what the image of a neighbor should have been. I'm encouraging you today to do a similar rethinking of what does it mean to be the image of God, the Imago Dei. As much as I would like it to be, it's not my magnificent beard. It's not about skin color, no matter what racists have claimed in the past. However, it might just be if you act in alignment with that of God within. Micah 6:8 explains exactly what it means to do this. What is it that God requires of me to live in alignment with that of God within me? Micah 6:8 reads like this. He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. I would encourage you, the live stream will end here in a moment. And as it does, just sit for a little longer in what we call waiting worship. Allow yourself to think on the following queries. Maybe God, that of God within you, the image of God, will speak. Sometimes when God does that, it's for us, and sometimes it's for the group. And I know that you weren't here to share with us when we did this live, but comment. Tell us in the comments on YouTube. We all need to hear from each other the voice of God. So here's the queries. Where have I seen that of God in someone I did not expect this week? When I encounter someone different from me in background, belief, or behavior, how do I respond to the image of God in them? If I am a living image of God, what part of God's character is most visible in me right now? What part is least? And finally, how might I actively act out God this week in justice, in kindness, and in humility? Please join me in waiting worship. Thank you.